The greatest empire in history was already dying, and almost nobody knew it. For over 2 centuries, the Mongol hordes had shaken the earth beneath every civilization they touched. From China to Poland, no army, no wall, and no winter had ever stopped them. But by the 1400s, the empire had cracked, split into warring fragments called the Great Horde. And into this fracture stepped a man whose madness was as dangerous as any army. Ivan the Terrible, Tsar of all Russia, was brilliant, brutal, and completely unpredictable. Today we are breaking down exactly how Ivan's madness and nature's fury combined to end the Mongol Age forever. Moscow in the 1550s was a city ruled by fear, and Ivan had designed it that way. He had already begun purging his own advisors, convinced that everyone around him was a traitor. This was not just cruelty, it was a calculated weapon of psychological terror. His enemies never knew when the blade would fall, and that uncertainty paralyzed them. Then Ivan created the Oprichnina, a secret police army dressed in black who answered only to him. They burned villages, executed nobles, and tortured anyone Ivan pointed at. When Mongol diplomats arrived in Moscow seeking negotiations, they found a court consumed by paranoid violence. Ivan refused to negotiate. He saw diplomacy as weakness and the horde as prey. Kazan was the key, a powerful Tatar city sitting on the Volga River, the lifeline of horde trade. If Ivan could take Kazan, he would sever the horde's most vital artery of money and supplies. In 1552, Ivan led an army of 150,000 soldiers, the largest Russia had ever assembled, to Kazan's walls. For weeks the siege dragged on, every assault repelled by fierce Tatar defenders. Ivan's men were dying in the cold, and the horde believed they would never break through. But Ivan had a secret weapon. His engineers were tunneling beneath the city walls with gunpowder. The explosion tore a hole in history, and Russian soldiers poured through before the dust had settled. The battle inside Kazan was savage. Every street became a killing ground. Kazan fell in October 1552, and the horde's greatest trading city was now Russian territory. But Ivan had a second ally in this war, one that no army had ever been able to defeat. The Russian winter was not just cold, it was a strategic weapon that Ivan knew how to use. Horde supply lines stretched thousands of miles across open steppe, and winter froze them completely. Without supplies, Mongol garrisons couldn't be reinforced. They simply starved or froze in place. Every winter made the horde's strategic position weaker while Moscow grew stronger behind its stone walls. Ivan had deliberately built stone fortifications and supply depots. His army could fight in winter, theirs could not. By 1556, Ivan marched south on the frozen Volga itself to take Astrakhan, the horde's last major stronghold. Astrakhan was the last artery, the horde's connection to the Silk Road and the Caspian trade. The Astrakhan Khan made the calculation every leader fears: fight and die, or flee and survive. He chose to flee, abandoning the city without a major battle, and with him fled the last hope of the Great Horde. Russian soldiers walked into Astrakhan almost unopposed, and the horde's last city was taken without a siege. In a single decade, Ivan had taken everything: Kazan, Astrakhan, and the entire Volga River Valley. But Ivan's greatest weapon was not his army. It was the terror that lived inside every Mongol leader's mind. Ivan sent deliberate messages to horde leaders, sometimes offering peace, sometimes threatening total annihilation. The uncertainty was the weapon. The horde never knew which Ivan they would face, the diplomat or the butcher. And while they tried to understand Ivan, their own internal rivalries tore the horde into smaller and smaller pieces. Clan fought clan for scraps of territory, while Ivan methodically absorbed everything around them. What had once been an empire stretching to Poland was now a handful of desperate clans on the open steppe. By the 1580s, the Great Horde as a political entity had effectively ceased to exist. The warriors who remained were scattered. No Khan, no army, no homeland. In Moscow, Ivan declared himself ruler of the Volga, the Caspian, and the eastern steppe, lands the Mongols had held for centuries. The survivors fled south and east, seeking refuge among other Turkic peoples on the edge of the world's maps. Ivan had done what the Teutonic Knights, the Chinese, and the Persians had all failed to do. He had outlasted the Mongols, but his victory was not clean. It was soaked in the blood of his own people as much as his enemies. The Oprichnina didn't just terrorize Russians, it systematically destroyed any noble family with ties to Mongol trade networks. Entire aristocratic lines were erased. Anyone who might negotiate with or supply the horde was eliminated. Ivan was methodically cutting every economic and diplomatic thread that kept the horde alive. The Silk Road trade that had sustained the horde for generations dried up almost overnight. Without trade, the horde had no silver to pay soldiers, no grain to feed horses, no weapons to fight with. And as Ivan tightened his grip, nature delivered blow after blow to the already weakened horde. The winters of the 1560s and 1570s were among the coldest recorded in centuries. Historians call it the Little Ice Age. Pastures that nomadic herds depended on were buried under meter-deep snowfields for months at a time. Rivers froze months earlier than normal, blocking the fishing and water supplies that sustained winter camps. Even the shamans could not explain or reverse what was happening. It felt like the gods had turned away. Without horses, the Mongols lost their greatest military advantage: speed, mobility, and terror. The horde's khans faced an impossible reality. They could not fight Ivan, they could not survive the winter, and they could not trust each other. Every strategic option was a dead end, and the arguments grew louder as the options grew fewer. The young warriors who had grown up hearing stories of Genghis Khan's conquests now faced only retreat and hunger. At the final Great Council, there were barely enough senior khans left to make a quorum. One by one, the horde's leaders surrendered, fled, or simply disappeared into the vast steppe. The Volga River, once the heartbeat of Mongol trade, became a Russian highway within a generation. Wherever the horde had stood, Russia built churches, forts, and cities, erasing the nomadic past with stone permanence. The Cossacks, freed from Mongol threat, pushed south and east, beginning Russia's own age of expansion. Russian chronicles declared the Tatar yoke, over 240 years of Mongol dominance, officially and permanently broken. The Mongol people survived, scattered, diminished, but culturally unbroken across the steppes of Central Asia. Two worlds had collided, and only one had walls strong enough to outlast the cold. But Ivan's victory came with a price. His own mind had broken under the weight of his paranoia. He had murdered his own son in a fit of rage, an act that haunted him until his dying breath. His purges had destroyed the very nobility that Russia needed to govern its vast new territories. When Ivan the Terrible died in 1584, he left Russia larger than any czar before him, and more unstable than ever. He had built an empire on madness and ice, and that foundation would crack under every czar who followed. What the Mongols had built over a century, Russia absorbed in a single lifetime, and the world's maps were never the same. Historians still debate whether the horde was destroyed by Ivan, by the winter, or simply by the weight of its own internal fractures. The steppe does not remember defeat. It simply continues, as it has for thousands of years. The descendants of the Great Horde still ride these plains today, carrying a history of conquest and survival in their blood. History is written by those who outlast the cold, but the steppe remembers everyone. Two forces collided in the frozen heart of Eurasia, and together they reshaped the modern world. The armor rusted, the banners rotted, and the empire faded. But the question it leaves behind does not. Was it Ivan's genius, nature's cruelty, or the horde's own divisions that truly ended the Mongol Empire? Drop your answer in the comments below, and if history's darkest turning points fascinate you, subscribe now, because we are just getting started.
Tell me.